History is written by the victors. But what happens when the historian vanishes before the story is finished? This is a mystery from the ancient world, a story nearly 2,500 years old. The story of a man who documented a brutal war with unprecedented clarity, yet his own life is a collection of shadows and whispers. His name was Thucydides. He is called the father of scientific history, but his greatest work, a monumental account of the Peloponnesian War, ends in the middle of a sentence. Why? Some say he simply died, but others hint at a more sinister conclusion. This is the story of the mysterious Athenian historian and general Thucydides. Thucydides was born in Athens in the year 460 BC. His father's name was Ullerus, from the Athenian family of Halimus. Legend has it that in his early life, when Thucydides was 12 years old, he and his father were supposed to have gone to the Agora of Athens, where the young Thucydides heard a lecture by the historian Herodotus. According to some accounts, the young Thucydides wept with joy after hearing the lecture, deciding that writing history would be his life's calling. For nearly 30 years, the Greek world tore itself apart. The great city-states of Athens and Sparta, once allies, became locked in a devastating conflict. Chronicling this epic struggle was an Athenian general named Thucydides. He vowed to create a record of the war that would be a possession for all time. He sought to explain human nature in times of crisis, to understand what drives nations to war and what societal breakdown looks like up close. He survived the Great Plague that decimated Athens, documenting its horrors with chilling precision. Yet after 27 years of war, his history falls silent in the year 411 BC, 7 years before the final surrender of Athens. The story is incomplete, the final chapters forever unwritten. To understand the mystery of his unfinished work, we must first examine a pivotal moment in his life, his disgrace. In 424 BC, Thucydides was not a historian, but a strategos, a general in command of an Athenian fleet in the northern Aegean. He had deep connections to the region, including owning gold mines, which gave him significant influence. The vital Athenian colony of Amphipolis came under a surprise winter attack by the brilliant Spartan general Brasidas. A message was sent to Thucydides on the nearby island of Thasos, a half-day's sail away. He raced to save the city, but he was too late. Brasidas, knowing Thucydides was coming, offered the city moderate surrender terms, which they accepted. When the Athenian fleet arrived, Amphipolis had already fallen. The news was a catastrophe in Athens. The city was of immense strategic importance. A scapegoat was needed, and Thucydides was the perfect candidate. He was tried, and the verdict was swift: exile. For 20 years, he was banished from the city he loved. In his own words, he wrote, "It was my fate to be an exile from my country for 20 years after my command at Amphipolis." Was this a simple case of military failure? Or was Thucydides, a man from an aristocratic family, a convenient target for the radical democracy he often seemed to criticize? And MB, Thucydides often criticized the democratic factions in Athens. The question remains unanswered. This personal tragedy became a triumph for history. His exile, he later wrote, gave him the freedom to observe affairs more closely. He was no longer just an Athenian. He could travel among Sparta and its allies, gaining a unique and balanced perspective on the conflict. It was during this long exile that he painstakingly compiled his history, relying on eyewitness accounts and his own sharp analysis. But this raises another mystery. How did he obtain such detailed information? His history includes lengthy, powerful speeches from key figures on both sides. Thucydides himself admits these are not word-for-word transcripts, but reconstructions of what, in my opinion, was called for by each situation. Is this objective history or brilliant, biased recreation? He claimed to have applied strict standards of evidence, but unlike his predecessor Herodotus, he rarely names his sources, leaving us to trust his judgment alone. Which brings us to the final and most perplexing mystery. Why did the writings stop? His account of the year 411 BC cuts off mid-thought. For decades, the war raged on, culminating in the total defeat of Athens in 404 BC. Thucydides lived to see the end of the war and even mentions events that occurred years later. So, what stopped him from finishing his life's work? One theory is simple, a sudden death, but the circumstances are anything but clear. An ancient source written long after his time, Pausanias, claims Thucydides was allowed to return to Athens after its defeat. However, this account alleges he was murdered on his way home. Could a political enemy, angered by his critical history, have silenced him forever? Another theory suggests he lived until around 397 BC. If so, why did he not finish the last 7 years of the war? Was he unwell? Had the trauma of Athens' defeat broken his spirit? Some have even suggested that perhaps his daughter published the work as she found it, unfinished. We are left with a ghost, a brilliant mind who analyzed the follies of war and the fragility of democracy with a cold, clear eye. He gave the world a new way of understanding the past, a scientific history free from myth and divine intervention. The case of Thucydides, the Athenian historian, remains unsolved.